So you're interested in philosophy and you're not sure where to begin. If so, this episode is for you. And if you're already deep into philosophy, this episode is also for you because I'm going to recommend two books that are just phenomenal introductions to philosophy. Definitely great beginner books, but they are books that I return to again and again because I get so much out of them. So, whether you are a philosophical veteran or you're just interested in entering the larger philosophical conversation, stay tuned. This will be a brief episode. We're going to have some fun and we're going to talk about reading. And the books that I have picked out are accessible, they are affordable, and I think they are books every human being should read, whether you plan on being a dedicated, specialized philosopher or not. You know, one of the themes for our Philosophy for the People channel, which, by the way, is now available on iTunes and Spotify. So if you're not subscribed to Philosophy for the People on iTunes and Spotify, please do that. We're not just on YouTube anymore. So check out the new platforms that we are on. But anyways, one of our themes is making difficult thought easy. And that is not a theme that is original to me. In fact, that theme comes from the author I'm going to recommend today, and that is Mortimer Adler. Mortimer Adler was a brilliant mind. He has a really interesting philosophical backstory himself. He's the author of many very important and successful books. He's probably best known for his book, How to Read a Book. That's not the book I'm going to recommend today, but that is a book that you should read. You should read the book, How to Read a Book. It's a lot more substantial than it sounds. It's not like something you would read to a 2-year-old. It's really about how do I engage with a book that is currently above my level and move myself when it's just me in the book from a state of understanding less to understanding more. It's about being the most demanding and active reader you can be. So his book, How to Read a Book, was very popular, but he's got many other books. And there's two of his books I want to recommend to you now because I think that they are excellent introductions to philosophy. Now, I want to make the note that I think it's really important that if you are going to get into philosophy, that you read the great books, that you read the primary text, you read Plato's Republic, you read his dialogues, you read Aristotle's Ethics. Essentially, you just read and follow along all of the series that we're trying to put on here at Philosophy for the People. We're currently going through Aristotle's Politics. We've already done his Ethics. We've done Plato's Republic. We've done Kant. We've done Leibniz, and there's many, many more to come. So you cannot ever, if you want to be really, I mean, if you want to be a great philosophical generalist, and I think all philosophers should strive to be generalists, then you cannot get around reading the great books, engaging with the great ideas. And the person who emphasizes this the most is the person I'm going to recommend to you now, which is Mortimer Adler. In fact, if you go to the end of How to Read a Book, which again is not the book I'm recommending in this episode, but it is a book I recommend, he just has his famous list of the great books, of the great ideas, and will just take you through all the books that you need to read for a truly robust classical philosophical education. So I recommend all of that, you know, from Plato to Nietzsche, Leibniz, all those guys, Kant. Adler's How to Read a Book has just a great list at the back of it. You can just go there. But what about something quicker? What about something a little bit more accessible? Pat, just help me get started with philosophy. Give me something kind of accessible. I know you like Aristotle. Everybody likes Aristotle, but I tried to read his physics and I just threw that thing right out the window. Believe me, I get it. Aristotle he's he's a little hard just to dive right into. So here, let me get right to the recommendations. Let me recommend these books, and then I'll talk a bit about each of them and why I'm recommending them, why I think they are such good starting points. So the first one I've recommended before. I'll talk a little bit about it right now, and that's Adler's book, 10 Philosophical Mistakes. Now look at this. Look at this book. If you're watching, you'll see that this book has really been through a war. It's amazing that the cover is still attached to it, and that's because this is a book that. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is my second or third copy of this book. I often buy multiple copies of books over the years just because they get so worn out. And this is one of those books that I have returned to again and again and again. So let me emphasize, great beginner book, but it's something that you will find value in, I think, 10 years from now, as much as you do your first read through. So what is 10 Philosophical Mistakes, and why do I recommend this book? Well, I recommend this book because Adler sort of gives you a great quick summary of the history of philosophical ideas. And what he's trying to do in this book is he's trying to find where he thinks philosophy went off the rails with certain modern thinkers. He's trying to pinpoint certain mistakes in reasoning, and he uses Aristotle's famous line that a little mistake in the beginning can lead to a huge calamity downstream. And he tries to pick out mistakes that were made by thinkers. He picks on Locke a lot, like thinkers like Locke and Hume and Hobbes and Marx and Descartes, and saying, here's the mistake in their philosophical thought that has led us to some really catastrophic and absurd consequences today, either concerning ethics or consciousness or free will or political authority. So he's identifying a lot of philosophical problems that we face in modern philosophy, and he's arguing we never needed to. These are problems that we could have avoided if we went back to perennial philosophy, right, and used the resources that were provided to us by thinkers like Aristotle, like Thomas Aquinas. So a lot of what this book does is he gives you a history of the development of philosophical ideas, and he's going to give you a very nice overview of the thought of people like Locke and Hume and Descartes. And he's going to analyze them critically. And he's going to say, here's the mistake. Here's the mistake that they made regarding, say, consciousness and its objects. Or here's the mistake that they made concerning political authority. Or here's the mistake that they made in thinking that there's an is-ought gap, right? For those of you familiar with the famous is-ought gap in ethics. So what's great about this book is it's hitting on and introducing you to many really important philosophical themes and different branches of philosophy: political philosophy, ethics, philosophy of mind, you name it. They're all in this book, but he's situating it in a greater conversation of where he thinks modern philosophers made a mistake that really set us on a poor philosophical trajectory. And then he provides what he thinks the solution is to each of these mistakes, whether it's a mistake concerning the relation between mind and world and human consciousness, or words and meaning, political authority, freedom of will. And then he goes back into the great tradition, and he's drawing a lot from Aristotle and Aquinas, and he's saying, here's how we can correct that mistake or avoid that mistake entirely. So I recommend this book for the reason that it introduces some of the perennial philosophical issues, issues that are still thought about as much today as they ever were. It introduces you to different branches of philosophy and does it in an exciting way by showing that ideas have consequences. A lot of the sort of absurdities of our modern times, and we kind of live in a museum of absurdities these days, can be traced back to mistakes in reasoning from prominent thought leaders and philosophers. And he does a great job of introducing them, representing them fairly. Adler has no, he's not engaging in cartoons or caricatures. He's a serious thinker. He understands the people that he's representing and critiquing. And then he shows how to correct these mistakes. So I think it's not only a great introduction to philosophical thinking generally and in specific topics, but I think it's also a good introduction of getting you thinking in the right direction, right? He is providing a direction of what he thinks the sort of right way of thinking about these issues. He's not merely reporting. He is saying, I think this is the right way to think about these issues. And I agree. I think generally, I disagree with Adler on some specifics here and there, but I think generally the direction that Adler charts in this book is the right direction on these big issues, on issues like freedom of the will and political authority and consciousness and its objects and formal and material science. There's a lot in here, but don't let that intimidate you. This book is really well written. It's really accessible. It's got to be pretty cheap. It's definitely less than $20. You might be able to find it for like 10 or $12. Kindle's probably even cheaper than that. It's a fairly quick read. You can get through it quickly. You will be challenged at points, and you will be forced to, try to wrestle with concepts and ideas you might not have ever wrestled with before, especially if you're totally new to philosophy. But this is a great introductory philosophical book. So I'm recommending this one right here and now, 10 Philosophical Mistakes by Mortimer Adler. Now, the second one is going to complement that. And this is his book called The 6 Great Ideas. And the 6 great ideas for Adler are truth, goodness, beauty, liberty, equality, and justice. And he's thinking, what are these ideas and how do we think about these ideas? Truth, what is truth? Goodness, what is goodness? Beauty, what is beauty? Liberty, what is liberty? Equality, what is equality? Justice, what is justice? What is the history of these ideas? How do we think well about these ideas? Also, a great introduction to the history of philosophy. Again, he gives you, sort of competing views on these ideas, especially when you get to goodness. He's going to help you understand all the debates in both meta-ethics uh, and different competing ethical theories. So he's going to give you kind of a good lay of the land of different philosophical debates, how these debates emerge, the different camps in these debates. But again, Adler's not playing a purely neutral position. He's not just reporting. He does a great job reporting in a fair way of these different positions. But what I like about Adler is he does come down on what he thinks the right positions are, and he supports it through argumentation. He's not a moral subjectivist or relativist. He's a moral realist, for example, and he argues for why he thinks you should be a moral realist and what ethical system he thinks is the best for securing moral facts and engaging in moral reasoning. And of course, he leans towards a sort of virtue ethic and traditional natural law approach. So he's not entirely neutral. I don't want to pretend like he is, but he's somebody who I think does an extremely fair job of representing the different views, reporting them well and accurately, and then giving good arguments and considerations in the positions that he thinks are ultimately correct. Now, what I want to do with this book is I just want to read a little bit of the introduction, just like a couple paragraphs, just so you get an idea of his style. Because what I love about Adler is he's such a great writer. And this is sometimes the problem when it comes to philosophy books. Sometimes you'll have brilliant philosophers who are terrible communicators, right? Or they just have no regard for the level of experience or ability of their readers. They're working at their level, and if you aren't at that level, then too bad, you can't keep up, then sorry, you're just no longer going to be part of this conversation. Now, some of my favorite philosophers are brutal like that. I mean, I mentioned Barry Miller and Bernard Lonergan. These guys are brilliant philosophers, some of my favorite, but the truth is, they're operating at their level. They're not concerned with really much hand-holding at all. And if you want to engage these guys, you really have to make the investments really hard. Adler's not like that. He understands that a lot of the stuff he's dealing with can be very difficult conceptually, but he has a great job of making it accessible and introducing people to the topics without diluting it, without dumbing it down. Because that's the other kind of side of philosophy books is, okay, sometimes you'll have somebody who's a really good communicator, a really good writer, but they're just not very great at philosophy, right? They kind of dilute or misrepresent positions and they dumb things down. What I love about Adler, and part of why I'm recommending Adler, is I think he finds that perfect sweet spot. He doesn't dilute things, he doesn't dumb things down, but he makes them accessible. And it shows that, and he has clearly a clear command of these ideas because he's able to make them so accessible. To me, that is a sign of mastery. When somebody can take something that is quite difficult and simplify it without make it simple without making it simplistic. That shows me that they have a great command of what they're doing. Adler is your guy for that. Now, I just want to read a little bit just so you get an idea of his style, just how great of a communicator he is. This is just from the introductory chapter called Chapter 1, Philosophy is Everybody's Business. He says, it cannot be too often repeated that philosophy is everybody's business. To be a human being is to be endowed with the proclivity to philosophize. To some degree, we all engage in philosophical thought in the course of our daily lives. Acknowledging this is not enough. It is also necessary to understand why this is so and what philosophy's business is. The answer, in a word, is ideas. In 2 words, it is great ideas. The ideas basic and indispensable to understanding ourselves, our society, and the world in which we live. I mean, that's really 2 awesome introductory paragraphs. He's like, philosophy, look, we all engage in it, even if we're not aware of it. What is philosophy? Well, it's the business of ideas. It's the business of great ideas, ideas that are basic and indispensable to understanding ourselves, our society, and the world in which we live. Let me read just a little bit more. And by the way, I see lots of good comments and questions here. If you guys want to do some Q&A or commentary, just keep it coming and we'll jam at the end here a little bit. Let me just read just a tiny bit more. He says, these ideas, as we shall see presently, constitute the vocabulary of everyone's thought. Unlike the concepts of the special sciences, the words that name the great ideas are all of them words of ordinary everyday speech. They are not technical terms. They do not belong to the private jargon of a specialized branch of knowledge. Everyone uses them in ordinary conversation, but everyone does not understand them as well as they can be understood, nor has everyone pondered sufficiently the questions raised by each of the great ideas. To do that and to think one's way through to some resolution of the conflicting answers of these questions is to philosophize. Such a great summary. All right, one more paragraph. This sort of summarizes what this book is about. This book aims to do no more than to provide some guidance in this process. Not for all the great ideas. That would be too long of a book. But for 6 of them, 6 of obvious importance to all of us. Truth, goodness, and beauty on the one hand, liberty, equality, and justice on the other. So I wanted to read those paragraphs, not just to give you an idea of just his writing style, which I think is just incredible and just so fluid and natural, but also to summarize the book. So that should give you a good idea of what that book is about. I would get both of these books and I would read them in tandem. It really doesn't matter which one you start with. 6 Great Ideas is a little thicker. It's going to take you a little bit longer. So maybe start with 10 Philosophical Mistakes and then go to 6 Great Ideas. But it really doesn't matter. You can start with either or. You can alternate. The books are complementary. They do cover some of the same themes, but he often takes different angles of approach onto those themes. So that's it. These are the 2 books I recommend for anybody who wants to get into philosophy. If you've already been in philosophy, even if you have your PhD, get these books. You're going to love them. They're so good. They're just so good. And I return to them again and again and again. I cannot recommend Adler's work enough. It's funny. I actually read Adler years and years and years and years before I really appreciated him as a sort of Thomistic philosopher, because I read How to Read a Book when I was pretty young and I loved it. And then I just never thought to see if like Adler had written anything else. And then many years later, I saw that he had a book called How to Think About God, which is also a really good book on natural theology. And I was like, hold on, this is the same Adler. This is the same guy, right? And just made this weird connection many years later. So yeah, grab those books. And here's what I want to know. And you can comment if you're in the live stream. If you're watching this after, put it in the comments below. What 1 or 2 books, just 1 or 2 books, would you recommend as an introduction to philosophy for someone who wants to get started? I would love to hear your recommendations, and I'm sure people would love to see your recommendations below. Put together just 1 or 2 books. That's it. And the reason I picked Adler is I think he covers a range of really important ideas. He makes it exciting. He shows what the stakes and the consequences are, why philosophy is important, why it matters, why to some extent it's sort of inescapable. He provides a very clear roadmap, and he's fair. He reports positions accurately. He doesn't straw man, but he takes a position, and he gives, I think, very good arguments for his position. So that's why I chose Adler. There's many other good beginning philosophical books. In fact, I'm looking at one right here. This isn't an official recommendation in this video, but it's sitting right here, so I might as well recommend it. Here's Ed Fazer's Guide on Aquinas. This is a great beginner guide to Aquinas. I don't know if I would recommend it as like an intro to philosophy in general. If for somebody who just wants to kind of understand one philosopher, I think this is a good one, but I wouldn't recommend this over Adler's books, which I think are better introductions to philosophy more generally. That's no fault to Fazer, because that isn't what he's trying to do. So those are my recommendations, and I hope you like them. I hope you take them. I hope you read them. And I hope you enjoy them. I am sure you will. Let's take a few comments here and questions. How are you guys doing, by the way? I feel like we've been a little light on content this past week. If you don't mind, I'll give a few updates real quick. I've been working on a number of projects. I'm coming up to a deadline on the 2nd book that I had this year. So I'm feeling the pressure and heat from that. I'm trying to finish up 2 more academic articles, which are close to completion. We have now officially launched Philosophy for the People on the usual podcast platforms. So we're not just on YouTube anymore. So I really appreciate you guys subscribing and helping and leaving reviews there. As many of you know, we had another kid recently. Briga is now officially, I think, 6 weeks old. So she's keeping us super busy. Yeah, just a lot of stuff going on, a lot of good stuff. And Jim's back he's back teaching now, so he's a little bit busier. But we are going to continue Aristotle's Politics here, hopefully this week and very shortly. And so yeah, lots of good stuff coming. And haven't forgotten about you guys. So just wanted to give a brief update. All right, let's see what you guys got in the comments here. Good to see so many familiar names and faces. David says, how to read a book is so good. I'm almost done with it. Just got through How to Speak and How to Listen. Yeah, great compliment in terms of like complementarity between those books. How to Speak and How to Listen is awesome to read either alongside with or right after How to Read a Book. And How to Read a Book it's kind of unfortunate because the title is so good, but it's somewhat misleading. People will think it's like, is this a book for toddlers? No, it's a book for adults. It's a book for serious thinkers, people who want to learn how to be the most active, demanding reader and get the most out of your reading and research as possible. It's also really a book on sort of Aristotelian logic as well. If you're familiar with Aristotelian logic and the different acts of the mind, you'll see that's sort of deeply embedded. Adler is definitely influenced by that traditional and classical line of thought throughout that book. You'll see it sort of stands as the backdrop for his approach to reading and research. So glad you enjoyed that, David. And again, I'll emphasize people, if you don't have that book, you should definitely get it. And after you read it or while you're reading it, just go right to the back of his great books collection and just start working your way through. He gives you the whole curriculum there. It'll keep you busy for the rest of your life on your philosophical journey, to be sure. Brendan says, how to throw a book. And did I say something about throwing books? Maybe I have. Have I thrown many books? I throw Nintendo controllers. I'm usually not one to rage quit video games, but every once in a while, if you play like something like old school, like Super Metroid or something, yeah. Sometimes you just got to throw a controller, man. I don't know if that would be vicious according to Aristotle or if it's like a justified anger. That'd be an interesting moral analysis. The ethics of rage quitting video games. Have I ever rage quit a book? No, I don't think I've ever rage quit a book. But I have rage quit some video games. Have you guys ever rage quit a book or video games? That'd be a fun episode. Maybe we should do an episode on books that we've rage quit. Here's a question. Brendan says, do you recommend physical books or ebooks, Pat? I find it's easier and cheaper with ebooks, but you lose out on the aesthetic appeal of books. I physical books 100% all the way. Why? Because as Adler will explain in How to Read a Book, you need to physically wrestle with your books. You need to dog ear, as you see. You need to highlight important sections. You need to take notes in the margin. You need to ask questions while you're reading. Write down questions, highlight, underline, like really physically wrestle intellectually, if that makes sense, with your books. So my rule is this, almost, and you can see like all the markings I have in my books, underlining important terms, dog-earing important sections, bracketing, I think like the most key ideas of the book. All these are techniques that Adler will teach you in How to Read a Book. So it's me just trying to use those techniques, and they make a big difference. I understand that there's kind of ways to do that with electronic books. I just hate it. Personally, I hate it. I do. I love physical books. I love when you love a book so good it looks awful, right? That said, Brendan, I totally get what you're saying about the cost of these things. So I'll get the ebook version of a book where I think the book isn't going to be like too demanding, not to be like condescending, but if I think it's kind of like going to be like a lighter read. So for example, if I read humor books and stuff like that, fiction, I'll get the ebook for that if it's much cheaper. If it's like $1 compared to like $12, I'll get the ebook version. I'll give you an example of this. So I recently got, this was a very good book, by the way, but I think it's an example of one that you could totally get on Kindle. I'll pull it up right now. It's not a philosophy book. But it's this book. It's a book by John Cleese, and it's called, here it is, have it on my Kindle, John Cleese, Creativity, A Short and Cheerful Guide. This is not a book that you're going to need to do heavy dog-earing, ask a bunch of questions as you're going through, underline terms that you might not be familiar with. This is a book that you can read in an hour, digest very easily, and there's no reason not to get the Kindle version, say, for $1 versus I don't even know what the print version would be. So that's when I'll do the Kindle versions. Now, if the print version is like $160 and the Kindle version is $10, then yeah, I'll probably get the Kindle version and just hope you get a paper version later. I hope that's helpful. But my general rule is physical copies, so you can wrestle with your books and implement the advice that Adler gives of how to really engage with a book, how to make a book really become a part of yourself, underlining, highlighting, dog-earing, writing in the margins, taking notes, summarizing at the end, actually writing in the book, right? I think that you're really limited in your ability to do that sort of stuff with electronic reading. The other side of it is my eyes are on a screen so much already. I just really don't want to be in front of a screen more than I already am. And for that reason, I just like the old school book. So that's a really good question. I hope that answer helps somewhat. Brendan also says, some people say Adler overwrites. Is that he could have gotten it across in a more succinct manner? Do you think this is beneficial for a layman, though? I disagree. I think Adler is a extremely succinct writer, extremely efficient in terms of his economy of word usage. A lot of philosophers overwrite and are extremely redundant. I don't think that's the case for Adler, or at least it's not the case for Adler in these books. If you read some of his more technical, more academic books, like The Difference of Man and the Difference It Makes, and that's the cool thing about Adler. He does have different levels of publications, like his book on the philosophy of mind and human anthropology is a very technical book. It's much more long-winded. It's much more in-depth. So maybe there's a bit of overwriting in that, but I definitely don't think that's the case of these books. I think they're extremely efficient and economical. But people may disagree, certainly. All right, let's take a few more here. Callum says, I glanced at the thumbnail and thought Adler's book said great sex ideas. Yeah. That would be some decent clickbait for a philosophy channel. But it's the 6 great ideas, just for clarity, if that hasn't come across by now. The other Brendan says, I like when an author expresses a relationship in multiple ways to make the implications more clear for us dumbos. Yeah, that's Adler's really good at that. He's good at taking different angles of approach to the different ideas, both within one book and across his different books. Because sometimes an author might come at an idea from one angle and it's kind of obscure, but then they come at it from a different angle and suddenly you gain insight. There's illumination. Adler understands that. He's a great teacher. He's a great teacher, a great philosophical guide. So if you like that, then, and if you think that's helpful, and I agree, it is helpful, you're going to get a lot out of Adler. Okay, I need to get back to my writing. So I'm going to cut this one here. But again, comment below. Let me know what 1 to 2 books that you think are great introductions to philosophy in general. And so we can help more people out and they can get more ideas in the comments one last time. And I'll put links to these in the comments as well, just so they have easy access. Mortimer Adler's 10 Philosophical Mistakes and Mortimer Adler's 6 Great Ideas are the 2 books I recommend as just great beginner philosophy books, but also books for anybody at any time in life. I think you're going to get a ton out of them. So do us a favor, as usual, if you won't mind, please like, comment, share, subscribe. If you are not yet subbed up on iTunes and Spotify concerning Philosophy for the People, which is now going to be quite distinct from my other Pat Flynn podcasts, please do so. And please consider leaving a review there as well. Those reviews really help bring new people into the show. So if you like what we're doing and you want to help us out, the easiest way you can help us out is leave a positive review on those platforms and channels. It really, taking 2 minutes to do that makes a big difference, and I'd really appreciate it. Thank you guys. You rock. We'll talk to you soon.